So welcome everyone to Higher Education Pay Strike Ballot Online Rally. For those people obviously that don't know me, I'm Mobina Begum, Chair of Unison's Higher Education Service Group and Branch Secretary at Leeds Beckett University. And this is our launch event for our Higher Education Pay Strike Ballot. I'd like to welcome everyone who's attending this webinar today, and I hope to hear from members, and obviously I hope you get a lot out of today's rally. It's really great that we've got 167 registered for this online rally, and I'm sure more will join as the session goes along. As you already know, our members have firmly rejected the final pay offer with a vote of 83%, and our strike ballot is now open. You should have all received your ballot papers through your letterbox at your home address. It's really, really important that all of you, all of our colleagues, all of our members vote in this ballot, as we can't do anything about the pay offer, which we know the employers will impose on us on the 1st of August, unless we hit the 50% of members vote. Today we have some fantastic speakers lined up to talk about why it's so important that we take part in the fight for better pay for all our members. So just before we go into the rally itself, I just want to kind of run through some basic housekeeping. As an attendee, you will be on mute and not visible for the duration of the seminar. After our first two speakers have given their presentations, we'll invite questions. You can put them in the Q&A box, which you can open from the icon on the bar at the top of your screen in Microsoft Teams. We will not be taking questions or contributions in person from participants due to the numbers and the limited time that we've got for this online rally. We're hoping that the webinar will finish no later than 2 p.m. Clearly people will have a lot of questions or may have a lot of points that they'd like to raise, and unfortunately we probably won't be able to cover everything, but we will put the email address for education@unison.uk in the chat box, and feel free to email us and we'll try and respond to as many questions as we can. This webinar will be recorded and a copy of the recording will be made available to provide to branches, providing all the tech works. Please bear with us if there is an occasional technical hiccup. We'll try and resolve this as quickly as possible. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our General Secretary, Unison's General Secretary, Christina McAnear, and Assistant General Secretary, John Richards. Christina and John are going to speak to us first, and we will then take questions from them for them in the Q&A box. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box on your screen whilst Christina and John are speaking so that we can have them ready. After that, we will hear from a number of Unison members who have agreed to give us their perspective on what it's like trying to live on their current pay and the cost of living crisis, why we need members to vote yes for strike action. Finally, we'll have a short video to show you, made by some members in Wales, about why it's so important to vote in this ballot. Right, so now I will ask Christina McAnear to officially open our online rally. Thanks, Christina. Over to you.
Thank you, Mobina, and thank you so much for asking me to speak at this, and thanks to you and the Service Group Executive, and to Ruth and Jennifer and Mike for all the work you've done in pulling this together, and of course huge thank you to everyone who's made it on to the call today. I know everyone's really busy, but it is really important that we're here today to talk about this, because as Mobina said, it's really critical for us at this time in your sector, in the HE sector, but also across all of our sectors, that we're engaging with members about why it's so important that we reject some of these dreadful pay offers that we've been seeing our members getting, and actually energise our members to take part in strike action. And I know that in this sector, you know, we have tried it several times. You've had a few ballots. We've managed to get over the 50% in a number of institutions, but not enough, as I'm sure everyone would agree. Because we really need this to be something that happens across the UK. Now, we need to be actually getting members out across the entire part of our union. And this time it does feel different. and I'm sure you know that, and then we'll be hearing from members who are actually, what it means to them to be living on the kinds of salaries what the pay increase would mean to them. And this time it does feel different, because you don't need me to tell you what's been happening. Food, energy, fuel prices, transport costs, everything is going up at the moment, and people's pay is just not stretching as far as it used to. And this comes, of course, on the back of 12 years of pay cuts, more or less, and 12 years of stagnation in funding for our public services. So I honestly and genuinely believe that when we are seeing our members get offers of 2, 3, 4%, at a time when inflation is running at 10% and expected to go higher, we have no option but to go out and ask members to take part in strike action. I genuinely believe that, and I don't say that lightly. I'm someone who's been a negotiator for many years, and I've never seen strikes as we don't call people out in strike for ideological reasons or political reasons or just to make a point. We call members out in strike to make a difference. We call members out in strike because we have to have a dispute, and it has to have an impact to force employers to come back and talk to us and put more money on the table that will get into the pockets of our members. And I used to be the National Secretary for Education and did negotiate in higher education. And I know from bitter experience how employers will say how much they value the jobs that our members do. And we all saw that during the pandemic, the kind words and the thank yous for all the people who were still on campus looking after students who couldn't go home, or, keeping everywhere safe and for those who had to be at work. But too often it's our members, the support staff, the professional staff, the technical staff, the administrative staff, cleaning, catering, porters, security staff, who are often the people who have very direct contact with students. And yet every time when universities look at what they should do with the money they've got, you're always bottom of the pile. And we know that, and they know we know that. And the time has come for us to fight back against this. We know that universities couldn't run without the essential jobs that you do and you and your members do. And we know that the HE sector is often squeezed for funding. But just as governments make decisions about what they will spend their money on, we know that employers also make decisions about where they will spend their money. So between 2015 and 2019, the percentage of income in the higher education sector spent on staff salaries actually dropped. It went down from almost 55% to just over 51%. Now that is appalling, that at a time when staff were being expected to do more and more work and to do work under greater stress and pressure, that the spending on staffing actually went down. Now that's a decision they've taken, that they don't want to spend their income on staff salaries, and it's up to us and up to our sister unions, UCU and EIS in Scotland, to actually force them to think differently about this. They won't put their money where their mouth is, and that's up to us to force them to do this. So as Mabina said, we have to win this ballot, and that means everyone in the union has to be behind this, pushing out the message about how important it is to actually return the ballot paper. It means everyone who works for the union, but it does mean all of our branches have to be focused on how we get our membership records up to date, how we engage with members at local level, how we actually encourage them to open that ballot paper, put a cross on it, put it back in a post box and send it back. And that's about saying to them, yes, we're asking you to vote yes for strike action, but you know what? If you want to vote no, because the key for us is turnout. So we need as many people as possible to take part in this ballot and return their ballot paper so that we hit the 50% in every single institution where we're balloting. And I do think, I said at the beginning, I do feel this is different now. that actually the mood in the country has changed. You can see that with the RMT strike. I watched the news last night. I don't think a single person who was interviewed in the street said they didn't support that strike. People were saying, it's inconvenienced me, I'm having to take a bus when I could have taken a train, but actually I understand why they're doing it, and we're very supportive of them. And I think we would get even more support in our services in unison. And whilst HE might not be, you know, the most visible sector, many people, as you know, are at university, have children, family members at university, and they can see the impact of the work that you do. It's time we made the employers see the impact of the work that you do, and that means getting a good turnout, getting a good yes vote, being able to take effective industrial action that actually makes a difference, makes the employers stop in their tracks and think about it, and think about how they treat staff, and think about how they treat our members. So I assure you, you have the full backing of Unison for this. I've already been speaking to regional secretaries about this and making sure that you've got support in the regions about how we get the turn out the vote, because that is the critical thing for us, is turning out the vote. I'm sure this won't be the only message that I send out, and certainly won't be the only thing that Unison Centre does, but good luck for the rest of the day, and I'll stop there, Mabina. Thank you. You're on mute, Mabina.
Apologies. Thank you very much, Christina. And I think what's really important is that we engage as many members as possible in getting them to vote, because I think the tide is turning. I see, I've been in higher education for 13 years, and it's really turning, and people have had enough, and we need members to voice that in terms of getting their ballot paper and posting it. So thank you very much. I'm sure people will have a lot of questions to put, but I'm going to remind everyone to put them in the chat, and we'll take the questions together after we've heard from John as well.
Mabina, can I just say, it looks in my screen, it says chat is turned off for this meeting.
Oh, sorry, so, it's in the Q&A.
Oh, in the Q&A, right, okay.
Yeah, apologies.
Right. Oh yeah, I see it, right, yeah, thanks.
In the Q&A. So I'll go on to John Richards to speak, and John will cover some of the technical information around the ballot. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Mabina. Yeah, I get the boring bit. I don't get the chance to do the rally, but I'll try and make it a bit more exciting if I can. But clearly, I can never follow Christina when she's on form like she is today. So I'm John Richards. I'm Assistant General Secretary. Funnily enough, I followed Christina through, so I was also head of education after Christina, and I was head of higher education after Christina as well. So I've got a long knowledge of the sector, and having worked in it as well, and having had kids who've just come out of the sector and seen the way that the sector's been run compared to when I went many years ago. My apologies for any background noise. My flats are being inevitably decorated, and there's people putting scaffolding up, so apologies if there's any background noise. So as you said, I'm going to talk through some of the background and detail who we're balloting, why we're balloting, and why new colleagues need to vote, although Christina and Mabina have already set out clear reasons why they think they should. So firstly, we're balloting 98 employers in this process, a significant chunk of the employers working in the higher education. 92 of those are higher education institutions, universities, and 6 are companies associated, either private companies or what are called arm's length companies, who are companies owned by the universities. And they are people who pay the same terms and conditions and are committed to do so. So under the law, we're allowed to ballot those people as well. So that means overall, we're balloting about 22,000 members, and we're balloting across the UK. And we're doing what's called a disaggregated ballot, and that means that the ballot is based on individual ballot by workplace, rather than having one big national where we add all the results together. We've decided to go, the Higher Education Service Group Executive decided to go down that route. And I was going to talk about facts of pay, but Christina's gone into some of them. Clearly, we know that salaries are 20% less than they were in 2009. And we know also that the number of senior staff earning in excess of 100,000 a year has continued to increase. So once more, we're seeing in this sector, as we are across the other parts of not just the public sector, the private sector, as low paid workers and lower paid workers, the people who do the jobs on the front line are stalled or have pay freezes or have low pay increases. We see senior managers and people who are running the country doing very nicely, please. I think I don't want to get into too much detail about the pay negotiations and how they happen, but obviously the employers come together as a group called the University and Colleges Employers Association, the UCEA, and they negotiate and bargain with us via what's called new JINCHs. There was an old thing, and that's the Joint Negotiating Council for Higher Education Staff. Each year, UCEA asks its members whether they want to opt into or out of national pay, and the vast majority still continue to do that. 145 universities are currently in it, although a number of them, small number, only recognise and negotiate for academic staff. So this year, pay negotiating meetings took place on the 30th of March, 25th of April and 15th of May. Initially, amazingly, the employers made no offer whatsoever, and we were really unhappy about this. At the second meeting, they made an offer well below inflation of 2.75% on spine, spine 20 and above, with a taper, which meant there was a little bit more at the bottom. This was only improved slightly towards the end of the day. And further disputes have happened, and further things we've tried to move them along. But actually, the end result and the final offer we've got is 3.1% for those on points 3 to 19, and those are the taper between 9% at the lower wages. So you can see that it's starting at the very bottom to approach sort of inflation. But actually, when you compare it, once you get above the medium size where significant numbers of our members sit, it's significantly lower than the 10%, which is the standard rate of inflation. But if you take the measurement called the retail price index, which is the inflation rate we like to use, it's well short of 11.8%, which RPI is currently on. So we're putting a claim for the retail price index plus 12%. We want a minimum wage of £12 per hour. So we can see this is well short of where we wanted to do so. So, they've made their final offer, 3%. So we need now to send a message back to them that says this just isn't good enough. We know that we've already gone through a whole swathe, as Christina and Naveen have said, a whole swathe of increases in prices, and we're due to face in October significantly higher energy increases, which could be, according to some commentators, for an average size house, up to £500 a month on the energy bills could start to do. And that's becoming impossible for people to say. Again, Vice Chancellor's made a lot of praise for staff during the pandemic, talked about how good we were, incredible work that you did out there, but actually once more have not been able to have not dug into their pockets like they should do. So this is a clear below inflation pay rise, and we need to be clear that this really isn't acceptable. And it's also worth noting at the moment that other sectors, other public services are being offered significantly more. We've had £1,400 flat rate in the NHS, which is worth more at the bottom. Only earlier this week, we were offered just under £2,000 for local government workers, which averages out for low paid workers at around 11% or so towards the bottom of it. And actually, when you take that into account, overall in that, the majority of people in that offer would be offered more than 8%. So over 50% of staff in local government are being offered 8%. A much closer, still not what we'd claimed for, and still not something that we're necessarily going to pick up. We have a meeting on tomorrow to discuss that. But nonetheless, employers are now starting to realise that there's a significant impact and we need to do something about it. So we're going to, we've opened the ballot paper now. The ballot last week, we opened on the 22nd of July. It closes slightly differently. In Scotland, it's going to close on the 19th of August, and in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, the 26th of August. And we'll be having meetings shortly after that of the service group executive to discuss that. And I think it's also worth noting that we're also going to ensure that strike pay for members is at a good rate. It will be £50 members a day, payable from day one for those who take part in strike action. So hopefully people shouldn't be losing significant money out of this. And for some workers, you know, this hopefully will mean that they don't feel that they're going to lose pay as a result of that. So we're making sure that we're going to reimburse people. And as Christina said, we know that the government are going to be on the attack. We can see that Liz Truss is talking about changing the laws. So it's absolutely vital that we make that 15%. And it's actually vital that we get the numbers in so we can work with the trade unions and we can ensure that that we can collectively work together with the unions and show the employers what we're made of, and show the employers we're not just going to sit down and accept this, that we are serious about this. This is a serious undermining of our members in public services and higher education, and we need to get out there. So please get out there, please vote, encourage your workmates to vote. We're talking about creating a new post of pay contacts, so we want more people to get involved in this whole process and distribute information. So if you're not a rep already, you just want to help out by distributing pay information, then we'll be helping you get involved a little bit more. So vote, get your colleagues to vote, and here's to a successful ballot and the employers backing down when they realise the strength of feeling. So thanks very much, Mabina.
Thanks, John. I mean, I think we can't say it enough, can we? We need to get everyone to get out and vote. And like I said already, I think the tide is turning. Members have had enough. We've seen a drip effect of pay erosion over the last decade, and I think the cost of living crisis just compounded that. So I think the members who might have previously accepted that are no longer willing to accept it, but I think we need to get people out and get them to vote in the ballot. So we'll move on to some questions now. Jennifer, any questions? Any points?
Mabina, me and Christina can see them, so we don't need to. Would you like us to actually,
please.
If we click on those? I think I've already mentioned. I'll deal with the first one, Christina, which is can you confirm strike pay? Can you not see them?
Yeah, I can see them. I'd answered a couple of them at least
great.
part, so I've typed in answers to a couple of them.
I'm not sure if other people say that, but basically, can you confirm strike pay for part-time workers? Well, as we said, it's up to £50 a day, and it's prorated for those people below that. So absolutely, strike pay will be at the rate up to £50 a day, and prorated if people earn below that. Christine, there's one on coordinated action. Do you want to talk about the work that you've done there?
Yeah, so we're working through the TUC to try and make sure that we're able to get as far as we can coordinated action across unions. It's easier to do that within sectors rather than across sector. You know, the reality is each sector has its own timeline for this, and they get different offers, so that it's a lay member decision what they do with that. So it doesn't matter what I say or what the NEC says in terms of the overall pay offers across our sectors. It will be for the members, and as it is for you in higher education, it's for the members in those individual sectors to decide what they want to do with it. Where we can, ideally, we would like to coordinate as much as we can, and we have a group called the Service Group Liaison Committee, which John leads on, which is looking specifically at that. And as I said, I'm working through the TUC as well to try and make sure that where we can and where it looks possibly in the autumn, that we'll be looking at maybe wider industrial action across some of our big sectors, then that we will obviously want to do that in coordination with other unions. You know, we've just had the results of a partial local government ballot across Scotland, and we're working very closely with the GMB and Unite on that, and we'll be coordinating action with them across that.
Mabina, shall I pick the next one up about BAOT?
Yes, please.
Great. There's a question there about BAT members appear not to be included in the vote, and it seems to be new. BAT, we've just negotiated a new agreement with BAOT. It's got us a significant chunk more money into that. Most BAT members are in our health group, and so we've negotiated a better deal. But they have chosen this time to be covered by the vote for UCU and EIS. So we have a joint agreement with them whereby members are also members of UCU and EIS. And so what we've been doing before is we found we were double counting and involving them. So we've had a discussion with them, and their votes, they will be taking part in the UCU and EIS votes.
Thanks, John. Are you able to answer the question around the Industrial Action Handbook and it being out of date and branches looking for kind of more
John, are
specific
you involved in the updating of the new handbook? Is that Maggie?
I'm not really. Maggie's doing that, but we are involved in the process. Sandy Nicol, who is also on the SGE, who's on the Service Group Executive, the body that runs higher education, is the chair of the Industrial Action Committee. And I know Sandy wants to progress this, and we're working with Sandy and others to make sure it is up to date. But things keep changing all the time, and if Liz Truss has a way, in 30 days' time, we'll have to rewrite it completely the way they are. But yes, it's definitely being worked on.
Will Unison on a national scale be talking to the NUS and attempting to garner a message of public support? Absolutely. If we get a national strike on this, and it was one of the ones I answered, somebody said, I think somebody from Leeds asked, could we get national publicity? The fact is, we put out press releases all the time, but sadly they're not always picked up by the national press. And particularly if we're talking about action that's only in a handful of places and they're kind of spread about, the national press is unlikely to be that interested in it, sadly. If we get a good yes vote here and we're taking strike action across the UK, we will be pushing to make sure we get as much coverage of this as possible, and we'll be working with the NUS and the UCU and EIS and the other unions indeed who are involved in Unite and GMB who are involved in this. So yeah, we will always be trying that. It's sometimes easier to get local coverage. If it's one university in one town taking action, you can usually get the local media to cover it rather than trying to get national media to cover it. But we do always try. But as I say, we can't force them to run with the stories that we put out, sadly.
Shall I pick up the last two, Mabina? Then I'm aware
Yes,
it's getting quite long, and you've got some other members. Clearly you've got some members who want to tell their story. So there's two more. There's one about making the higher education pay ballots linked to the support for the hours. We'll talk to colleagues in comms. The reality is the website by its nature is dynamic. So we put stuff on, but it rolls because otherwise people, if you just put the same stuff on there, it sticks up there. But we certainly have put a load of stuff up there about higher education pay ballots, and we certainly are advertising the support linked to other strikes, and that will be part of the process. One of the things we're doing under our big cost of living campaigns will be a whole new microsite that will put on it all the disputes we're running. It will have all the successes we've had and all the wins we've had over there, and that's due to be launched, I think, in September. They're working on it now, but there will be a new site where that people will be able to have those sorts of messages up there. And then the last one that I saw about Unite and UCT's timetable. Yes, whilst we always try and coordinate with other unions, we can't dictate to them their timetables and their ballot timetables. However, the change in law does mean you've got some more flexibility now about how and when you take strike action. So absolutely, Unite are important, but UCU are important, and we will try and make it the best we can to try and tie up. But as I said, we now have when they changed the law, they changed it in a sort of strange way that gives us a little bit more flexibility after that. So absolutely, you heard Christina's commitment. We will try and coordinate.
Thanks, John and Christina. So obviously, if people have got any further questions, keep putting them in the Q&A, and we'll try and respond to those, if not at the end, by email. So really, I'd just like to thank Christina and John for coming along and really supporting our ballot and our campaign to get better pay for our members in higher education. You're of course both welcome to stay to hear from members who are going to speak, but if you need to leave, that's fine as well. So thank you very much for your
Thanks, Mabina. I'm really sorry. I'm afraid I do have to leave. I've got another meeting popping up here. I'm supposed to be on at 1:30. Apologies for that, but I'm sure I'm sure you'll have you've got a great turnout, so I'm sure it'll be a good event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on, because obviously what's really important is that we also hear from members about their experiences. So the first of our members who will speak is Cassie Burns, who is a business analyst at the University of Leeds. Welcome, Cassie, and over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've spoken at a few rallies now on our picket lines at the University of Leeds, and normally I start by expressing solidarity with sibling unions in their ongoing action. I'm conscious of time, so I don't think I'll be able to list all of the people who are currently engaged in fights for fair pay and conditions. In real terms, we've heard about how HE pay has fallen every year for about 13 years now. And that's the primary measure of how much our employers value us. And it shows that every year, no matter how much we care and burn ourselves out for students and colleagues, the universities actively choose to value us less. I'm very fortunate that my partner and I have a combined income that means we don't have to choose between food, heating, or rent. But there are quite a lot of pay points below me on the spine, and I know from talking to colleagues at Leeds University on the picket lines that if you are having to make those terrible choices, you are far from alone. Having said I'm fortunate, if pay had kept up with inflation over the past 13 years, our combined income would be about £15,000 a year more, just if it had kept up. That's a life-changing amount of money. And for me, it would pay for fuel to go and visit my family in Scotland that I really can't afford to do very often. It would let me access healthcare that the NHS struggles to provide to trans people like myself. And it would mean that I could afford to have a child with my partner. What would it mean to you? The media likes to pretend and would like you to think that nobody likes striking workers. Even the leader of the Labour Party seems to think that organised labour is a bad thing. The truth that you see if you're on a picket line is very different. The level of support that we got at Leeds when we were on strike with none of our sibling unions was incredible. UCU and Unite, they were fantastic. But it was nothing compared to the support we got from students. They occupied the boardroom, made our VC look really quite silly, and so many of them stopped at the picket lines to say that they valued us and they thought that we were worth more. Our last week of action, a couple of months ago now, included an open day, and most of the parents I got to speak to, they absolutely agreed, and universities can do better. I'm trying to keep this short, so because I'm not sure what the other speakers have to say. So the last thing I want to say is that striking is hard. It's exhausting. You lose out on pay, although the strike pay helps massively, but it does work. The University of Leeds offered a cost of living payment to all staff. The initial offer they made was pitiful. It was a couple of £100 to staff up to sort of roughly upgrade 5 at the university. I'm not sure how that translates. And because we had a mandate and we had a week of strike action planned, we were able to argue, and we ended up getting £650 for everyone up to the top of grade 6. And that was a massive difference. And that was only because our members had turned out and voted for strike action. Beyond that, there's been a real shift in the way senior staff at the University of Leeds talk about pay. We've shown them that we believe we're worth more, and the university is nothing without the people who make it. Please vote yes for strike action and tell your colleagues why they should too. And thank you.
Thanks, Casey. And I think you made some great points in terms of actually getting out and striking and showing the employers that we're actually worth more. And I think that's what it's going to take for all employers across higher education to sit up and listen. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is a member, Kailash Singh, who is a control room operative in security at Leicester University. Welcome, Kailash.
I don't think they've been able to join us yet.
They've not been able to join just yet. Okay. So we'll come back to Kailash. Okay. So another Unison member who's come along to speak about their experiences, Lizzie Smith, who is an accommodation coordinator at the University of Brighton. Welcome, Lizzie, and over to you.
Hiya, thank you.
Hi.
And thanks, Cassie, for your bit as well. That was brilliant. So yeah, hi everyone, my name's Lizzie. My pronouns are she, hers, and they, them. I'm a member of the University of Brighton branch. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why I joined the union, how strike action influenced that decision, and why I'm for further strike action. So I joined Unison on the 1st of December in 2021, so I'm quite a recent member. And that was just in time for our strike on the 2nd of December. And that was after some encouragement from my colleague and Unison's biggest cheerleader, Shiv McSorley, who works in the accommodation team with me. So I have to say, I wasn't too hard to convince, so I might not be the best example of how to get people to join, get young people to join, but you know, I come from a left-wing family who have always supported strike action and unions if they've been union members themselves. I studied in a left-wing department at the University of Brighton, the humanities department, and fully supported my lecturer's strike action with UCU. Saying this though, I was still hesitant, and it did take me a while to join the union when I began working at the university. I've been working at the university about 3 years before I joined the union. So honestly, this was down to a question on sort of, was it worth it? What could the union actually do? And the cost to join. So don't get me wrong, the membership fee is very reasonable, and I'm really fortunate that I can afford to be a member. However, when I began working at the union, as a 20-something graduate from a low-income family, I'd finished university deep into my overdraft. I was trying to afford rent in Brighton on a grade 3 salary. Some months later, my partner had joined the union, and I had moved into a higher paid role. So I was still unsure about joining. Although I was incredibly frustrated with the university for the constant temporary contracts that I'd been on, which had ruined my renting prospects, the increased workload and fewer resources, I still wasn't sure what the point was, and you know, really why I should be joining. So skip to December 2021. I was living in an even more expensive flat in Brighton, as anybody who's here from Brighton knows that the rent costs are astronomical at the moment. I'd been off sick from work earlier in the year due to stress because of the heavy workload in our team, and many friends of mine and colleagues in the university were being treated really poorly with casual and temporary contracts as well. Meanwhile, mine had fortunately become permanent. So my colleague Shiv had informed me of the upcoming strike the next day and explained to me the reasons for the strike, because of the pay freeze at the time, despite a rising cost of living and inflation. And she also told me that the University of Brighton branch had voted to strike for the first time in 7 years. So it was actually the fact that the union was striking that finally pushed me to join, and gave me the nudge that I needed. So striking felt like a real stand. I was really excited by the prospect of it and potential change. And then fast forward 24 hours and I was on the picket lines for my first ever strike. So of course, in hindsight, I know now that I should have just joined the union earlier and been involved in the vote to strike, but we live and we learn. All this to say is that I'm absolutely for further strike action. I'm an example of how strikes can actually attract more members and be their reason for joining. And you know, they can actually see the action happening, which of course will result in even more impact. So I think that you know, a lot of people may be a bit disillusioned with the unions and whether they make a difference, especially with the financial commitment. But striking proves that we are willing to take action. Unions are worth joining, and that we are an advocate for workers. So, you know, as we all know, inflation is at over 10%. Our pay is only set to go up by 3%, and this is a pay cut. So striking now is more important than ever with rising cost of living. I don't need to tell any of you that many of our roles are becoming more demanding with fewer staff and fewer resources. It's really evident to me now that we're being treated as an exploitable labour force. We're not being treated as people. And so in my eyes, removing that labour is the most effective way to make an impact. You know, we need to strike now because we all deserve a lot better. But more than that, being in the union and striking is a way for us to show solidarity to other disenfranchised and marginalised groups. We need to strike for our lower paid colleagues and our colleagues on casual contracts who can't afford to join the union, but they need an advocate. We need to strike for our trans and non-binary colleagues who may not be able to afford to join for loads of reasons, but you know, a big one is that they're being forced to seek private treatments in the current climate, and they face employment discrimination. For our colleagues with children who can't afford to join because they can barely afford new school uniforms, and for our colleagues who face housing insecurity because they can't afford to pay the rent and bills. So I could go on and on, so many different examples, but I just really urge everyone to think of the bigger picture for our colleagues and other Unison members. And striking across the UK can set a precedent and show the government and all of the public sector and higher education and employers that it's not good enough, and encourage more people to join us in this fight. So please cast your vote. I really hope that you vote yes for strike action. But you know, as it's been said earlier, please vote either way and post your ballot. It's really important that you just vote even if it's yes or no. And I just want to finish with a few shout outs. So to Shiv, who I mentioned earlier, who was instrumental in me joining, and several others joining in our team over the years, and also to our branch for all of their hard work, dedication and proactivity in striking and getting a turnout. So yeah, thanks so much for listening. That's everything from me.
Thanks, Lizzie. And I think it's really important, is it, that we show solidarity with each other and support all our members, regardless of the roles they're doing, because some members won't be in a position to be able to take strike action. So really important that we work collectively, and we are stronger together. Thank you very much. Do we know if Kailash has joined?
They don't appear to have as yet.
Okay, so we'll move on to our next speaker. So our final activist, Robin Banks from UEA branch. Robin is a comms officer and a qualities officer. Welcome, Robert. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. I want to say thanks to Lizzie and Casey for their speeches. They've covered quite a lot of what I'm going to talk about, but UEA branch has historically not been able to strike over the last few years due to the anti-trade union rules of needing 50% turnout, and that's predominantly because of the language that we tend to have used at UEA. So we're based in Norwich, so we're very much in the almost the furthest point you can get east in the country, and we're constantly told that basically the university has no money, that it's living year to year, that it's constantly losing cash. But at the same time that we're having that, the Vice Chancellor's pay has now reached nearly £400,000 a year, which is going up way more than the 3% we were being offered on a continual basis, and that's before we then take into account his pension payments, which are not included in his pay, or the fact that his house is paid for by the university and cleaned by some of our members. We have our cleaning members who go and clean his house on way less pay than he can even imagine, but we're told that we need to constantly suck it up in order to keep the university going, which stings a lot, particularly when we take into account the UEA. They had the Sky House project, which was designed to build a new area for the arts and humanities to be in, which cost over £3 million to get done, and they ditched it. So it's £3 million thrown into the wind under the guise of the fact that COVID had hit, only for it to be sort of questionable on whether they then realised that it wasn't fit for purpose £3 million later. So we have that, and then we've got the issue of basic around cost of living as well. So I'm going to talk about my personal experience of it, of the fact that even with a 3% pay rise, I'm looking at the fact that because of the way that my bills will be going up, and I'm going to be paying at least an extra £50 next year, next October, which I share with my housemate. The £40 that I will receive with a 3% pay rise will be eaten up, so I will be losing money on that, plus the cost of food and the cost of all of those issues that mean that essentially I'm being told to take less money home every month for my rent and bills, but to be told, but expected on a number of occasions to be like, oh, well, you know, it won't exist if you don't do that, which I personally think is unacceptable. Like, I think that when I've got someone who is earning over £150,000 a year telling me on 10th of their yearly wage that I need to be responsible for keeping the university open, is when we need to start balloting for action. We need to be saying to our members that we aren't respected, that we aren't cared for in those manners. And that's really come to prominence recently, is that when I've been talking to members about strike action, about sending their ballots back, I had someone say to me, will Unison at UEA be opening a food bank? Because I will not be able to afford food from October. That it doesn't matter that these 500 quid that we're getting back from their now former Chancellor, probably soon to be Prime Minister, will not cover that. That we're having to actively think about the fact that we'll be running food banks for our staff because of the failures of the university and the failures of the government to look after us. And that's simply because profit is being put forward. Like, universities are no longer really running as an education sector, if we're honest. They're running more like businesses. At UEA, we're having active conversations where the goal is to increase our international students coming in, not because we want them here, but because we want their money, actively viewing them less as people and more as an actual source of income. And we need to push back against those things. We need to push back against that, and strike action's part of it. So to be able to recognise that we have value as staff members, but also when we talk to students when we go out on strike, because I'm very confident that we'll be able to hit the 50% this time and we'll be able to get the turnout, that we're saying to those members, and we're saying to those students, particularly our student staff members that we have at UEA, that you are not just a figure on a spreadsheet for the university. You are people, and you deserve better than that. A lot of this has already been covered, but I think particularly we need to talk about redundancies in the sector. Like, this is going to be a really big thing, that whilst we're going out on pay this time, next time it will be likely going out for our jobs. Like, we've seen what happened at Roehampton and Northampton, where they just turned around and closed departments, which affected our academic staff at UCU, who I've gone out on strike with numerous times. But it affects our students as well when you close those students, the access that the students have, and then that in turn affects our staffing, because when they constantly link the need for staff to the link to students, we are intrinsically linked, which is why I think it was really important earlier when we were asked whether NUS would be spoken to. But essentially we do one and the same at the moment. We need to fight for those issues to be sorted, because ultimately if we can't go out for pay, there'll be a lot of questions about whether they'll even try to like negotiate with us on our jobs. At UEA, we have a strategic review happening at the moment over the next 2 years. Many people here will probably shudder when I mention the company Uniforum, like being brought in to benchmark how much we're spending on staff. We know that's going to result in redundancies. The university won't acknowledge it. Whenever they're asked, they're like, oh, we want to try and avoid it. Well, no one wants to go into something making redundancies. We should just do it. So we know what's coming. We know what's going to be down the line. And this is across the whole of the HE sector. Like, that they're coming for staff. They're coming for our members. So going out on strike now for pay, so that we can say, like, that we can afford to live, we can afford to eat, we can afford to have our heating on. Much like Casey, I can't access the trans healthcare that I need through the NHS. But I definitely can't afford to do it privately without just saying to my landlord, hey, do you mind if I don't pay rent for a bit? What landlord's going to do that? Like, so that's what we need to be doing. We need to be going out talking to our members. We need to be fighting on these fronts, because ultimately without this, we're going to be losing more than just these pay ballots. So please return your ballots. Please talk to other members as well. Even if someone says, I've never voted yes before, trust me, you can swing them around to just sending back their ballot. Just this week, I had someone say to me that through conversations with me that they'd sent their ballot back for the first time, and in that first time they'd also voted yes for action because they can't do it anymore. People can't continue to have that weight put upon them. I'm going to wrap up there because I know we've only got about 6 minutes left. But yeah.
Thanks, Robin. Thank you for obviously sharing your experience and the importance of why we need to fight in this pay ballot, because it's much bigger than just our pay over this year. So yeah, thank you obviously all the speakers who've come along to speak at the ballot rally today. And before we end, we'd like to play you a short video.
Mabina, sorry to interrupt, can I quickly think, because I think I may have slightly misled with something I say. I think I suggested that the 50 quid was pro rata of part-time. I'm wrong, it's 50 quid. My apologies if I didn't explain that clearly, my apologies, but I thought I'd best get that out.
No, thank you. It's really important clarification. Thank you. So as we're coming towards the end of our strike ballot rally, we'd like to play a short video made by Unison members in Wales about why it's so important to vote in this ballot. And before we do that, I'd like to just invite John to kind of sum up and help us focus on the next steps. Over to you, John.
Getting very noisy here. Yeah, as I've sort of touched on already, we're about with the ballots up and running. We are the ballots will close in Scotland on the 19th of August, in England on the 26th of August. We'll be pumping out materials and support. We'll be, helping people. If people have rallies, please try and let us know, and we'll try and get speakers to them where we can. If they're local, regional people, or if we're in the area, we'll try and get national people. I think now the main focus is what we've learned from other strike ballots, and we've just run one in Scotland at the moment, is that what's important is that local engagement is what changes people's minds. So it's really important. We can do phone banking. We're looking in longer term. I don't know whether we'll have the technology here yet to be able to do peer-to-peer texting where people can text each other. But the most important thing is if everyone on this call talks to a colleague and gets them to vote, and they get to talk to another colleague and they get them to vote. If everyone pledges to talk to people and get them to vote, then we'll have some success, because that's now our real focus is let's get out there, let's get people voting, and let's get the result we really all want. Thanks, Mabina.
Thanks, John. Thank you. So we've now reached the end of our session. If you didn't get a chance to put a question in, or your question hasn't been answered, please email education@unison.uk. Thank you all for attending today and for putting forward those great questions and sharing people's experiences of why it's important to vote, but also why it's important to be active in our trade union. I've been really inspired about what we've heard today from the General Secretary, from our Assistant General Secretary, and from our members, Cassie, Kailash, Robin, Lizzie. Thank you very much. Thank you for the panel for answering the questions that were put forward today as well. I hope you all enjoyed our discussions and hope to see you all again soon. And we'll leave you with a short video from our members in Wales. Thank you.
When everything costs more, they are asking members like you to accept less. You deserve more. You have seen your universities through this pandemic, and you will see them through the next years to come. And they now need to show clearly that they respect you, they respect the work you do, and that they pay you fairly for that work.
The past couple of years have been really difficult for our workers in Welsh universities. They are the staff that have kept the universities running during the pandemic, and we think that should be recognised now with a decent pay offer.
We had no pay rise over the last few years, so I'm on the same amount of money as I was 2-3 years ago.
Although some of our members on the lower grades will see a higher increase in their wages, we are asking for a fairer wage for all of our staff. The staff on the lower grades, all the rise will do is bring you up to date with the living wage. It won't do anything to bring you up to where you should be with the cost of living increases the way they are.
It may not be the winter, but our members are discontented. Very soon, again, they'll have to decide whether they heat or whether they eat. Their hard-earned money is worth less today than it was a year ago, and they're expected to settle all of their bills with less money in their pockets. And the only way to change that is to vote in this pay ballot.
Most of my children are grown up now and with families, and so they are finding it really difficult to cope with just the food and stuff. They're asking to borrow money, you know, which obviously I can't do because I'm in the same position as they are.
We've currently got members who are lower paid, particularly in catering and other ancillary roles, who we're having to apply to our welfare fund to support them to be able to feed their children. That's not good enough. Here in Wales we do things a little bit differently. All 8 universities, all Unison branches, all 8 universities across Wales, we're calling you to support our campaign. Vote yes for strike action. We can and do deserve better.
Your ballot paper will be arriving from the 22nd of July, and we recommend that you stand with us and vote yes to strike action for the pay you deserve. If we don't vote yes to strike action now, your pay will be worth less, and we are worth so much more.
If you're worth more, you can't afford less.
We're worth more, we can't afford less.